the Houses of Parliament. This morning, King Charles will make his first visit there as monarch, where MPs and peers will offer their condolences directly to him. And in the last hour, his son, the Duke of Sussex, paid tribute to his guiding compass, the Queen. Harry also saying he now honours his father in his new role as King Charles III. An important day then politically and constitutionally for the King, and also personally. Later today, he will fly to Edinburgh, where, with his siblings, he'll follow his late mother's coffin into St Giles Cathedral for a service. Right now, for the King, though, the focus is very much on the capital. Following this morning events with me are two experts who have spent years writing about and observing the new Queen, the broadcaster Jonathan Dimbleby and the writer Catherine Mayer. First, though, let's speak to our political editor, Robert Peston. Robert, MPs and peers already taking their seats in Westminster Hall for this historic moment.
Yeah, I mean, we are witnessing so many important constitutional moments during these days of mourning. This one of the most important in Westminster Hall, almost 1,000 years old, been at the heart of the way this country has been run for pretty much all that time. It was the place where the sort of top court of the land sat for hundreds of years. The conspirators, led by Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Parliament, were tried there. King Charles III's predecessor, King Charles I, was tried there prior to that brief time that we had as a country as a republic. Today, King Charles will hear messages of condolence, addresses from the Speaker of the House of Lords, Lord McFall, and the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, and he will then address some 900 Lords and MPs.
Robert, this is the start of the King's tour, the new King's tour. There is some confusion this morning, wasn't there, over Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, joining him on the tour. What can you tell us about that?
Well, she will be physically present with him as he goes around the country, and she will attend the various services that he will be at. But I think there was, the sort of thought around both the Palace and Downing Street was there was a bit of sloppy language used when they originally talked about her role in all of this. They originally talked about her joining the tour. Let's be absolutely clear. This is King Charles III's tour. She is going very much in a subsidiary, supportive role.
Robert, thank you very much for now. We're just seeing pictures there as the proceedings are taking place at Westminster Hall. Jonathan Dimbleby, this historic place which has seen many historic events over the year, and now it's seeing this, the new King, going to the Houses of Parliament for the first time in his role as monarch.
Yes, and a very important symbolic event. I've been thinking, watching all these ceremonies, which of course have never been seen before by any of us in the public, how important they are. They're part of the fabric of a state, of a constitution. And when you go around the palace and see those floral tributes to the Queen, and a lot of them also wishing the new King the very best, there's a real link. It may seem strange on the surface, a real link between that and the images that you're looking at now, the pomp and circumstance of the state, because it is the fabric, and all the threads inside that fabric go from the public, the people, all the way through to the King. And I think I've been made much more aware of it, I think, than I ever was.
Yeah, I think the flowers, be that at Buckingham Palace or Balmoral or now moving to Green Park, a very human response to what we're seeing. This is about the very constitutional response.
Yes, this is it's very important. This is the relationship being confirmed between Parliament and the sovereign, the monarch, and the sovereign's titular authority, his head of state role has been confirmed in the proclamations. Here you have there were 18 hours of MPs. And they're, as you can see, coming to take the military, who will take their place here, because traditionally the military protect such events. They protect the sovereign. And I heard Robert earlier talking about the trials that took place here. For most of its time, this ancient hall, which was 11th century, was actually a place where coronations were celebrated. It's been through the most extraordinary times. It was very nearly burnt down in 1941, but is actually intact from the 11th century when William II said, I want to have a major hall. And he actually said it was too small when it was being built. It is huge if you've ever walked through it, and many members of the public have. The floor is embossed with plaques recalling key moments. I actually remember this is going to be used very soon for the lying in state. There will be hundreds of thousands of people shuffling down those steps to go past the catafalque, past the coffin, the mortal remains of the Queen. And I was there when Winston Churchill lay in state there and walked down there, and it's an unforgettable experience, absolute silence. The catafalque will have the military, 3 different regiments represented there at different times for 24 hours, standing absolutely still as you can see them standing there while they're on guard duty. It's an unforgettable experience, and it is, I think, in this case, George VI was the last monarch to be there in 1952 after his death, and we never saw it. It was, and television wasn't covering it. Here we will see it, and you will see the faces of such a diverse nation, and the head of state, the sovereign, who will lead the whole of the public sense of grief and loss, is part of that continuity. And I think that I always love looking at these formal faces of, don't you, Catherine? Because there's such solemnity and dignity. And, yes, they're dressed in strange traditional costumes, but that doesn't undermine the importance of what they're doing, which is to assert a set of principles about this country. We live in extremely uncertain, febrile times, and I think all of this reminds us how much the public generally, whatever their views may be, want stability. They want a degree of security that is offered by the state at which the sovereign is at the head. And here you've got the key members of the formal parliament coming through carrying the regalia, and there will be the Speaker of the House of Commons, Speaker of the House of Lords, and Lindsay Hoyle, of course, we've seen a lot of in the House of Commons. The MPs have already expressed themselves. I think there were roughly half, nearly 350 MPs who expressed condolences, some of them very beautiful and sincere, all of them speaking as MPs representing their constituents there as well, so that it is a national expression of condolence.
Catherine, we saw that the other day. Today will be very different, won't it? Because they will be expressing their condolences directly to the new king. We saw Margaret Beckett, the Labour MP, visibly upset. And today already this Westminster Hall that we are focusing on, that we were showing you pictures of right now, are seen as Jonathan was saying, of great serenity.
Yes, well, we're seeing, as he was also saying, 2 different things here. We're seeing the constitutional moment, and a lot of that often goes unnoticed, unseen. People don't understand the way that Parliament and the sovereign interact, and it's not that often that you do get to see it. But we're also seeing something very human, and you mentioned the Duke of Sussex's statement. This is an institution, the monarchy, but they are also human beings, and a lot of the coverage tends in many ways to dehumanise. And I think in all of these moments there's a kind of poignancy in people who are grieving, also carrying out these procedures and processes.
I think it was when Harry in that statement said that he pledged his loyalty to the king. I think that was quite significant. It follows on from the king saying that he loved his son and his wife, and I think there may be some who hope that because of that the which has been much publicity in the press, the autobiography that he has been proposing to write may not find a need for a publisher, if I put it like that.
We shall see. We're just watching now images of the Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle joining this event, the first stop on the tour.
It's
as we were
extraordinary,
saying.
isn't it? When you look at this, you think of all the hundreds of people, maybe more, who are involved in creating it, so that, maybe there are other places in the world who can do it like this, but the extraordinary order, precision, the unfolding of the event, huge organisation, huge preparation, but like all great events, you can rehearse as much as you like, but it's like a play. Once you're on the stage, you're not quite sure whether it will all work. It's working so far. There you can see former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, of course, prominent there.
Let's just see if we can take a listen in to get a true sense of the atmosphere. Just getting a flavour there of the atmosphere in Westminster Hall. I just want to bring you both back to the statement we've both mentioned from the Duke of Sussex that we've had in the last hour. Let me read you part of that statement. The Duke of Sussex said, "I am forever grateful for all of our first meetings, from my earliest childhood memories with you to my meeting you for the first time as my Commander-in-Chief, to the first moment you met my darling wife and hugged your beloved great-grandchildren. I cherish these times shared with you and the many other special moments in between." Catherine, I think it's fair to say a deeply personal statement from Harry that we've received this morning.
And that's really what I was trying to make, was a plea for people to take it at face value as something sincere and heartfelt. He did have a very close relationship with his grandmother, and in the deeply polarised debate around the sons of the king and what's happened in the past, I think a lot of that has been overlooked and obscured. To Jonathan's point about the book, I mean, it's already written and has a publisher, so that may still come. Otherwise, it's going to be one of the most expensive pulpings of a book in history. But I think it's again one of those things where you have to wait and see what's actually in it to know how divisive it really would be.
You know, we know that the divisions were sharp between father and son, between the king and Harry, although the king never spoke a word and has never spoken a word about it, between the two brothers. We've seen that reconciliation. I think so many people will hope. You know, this is a family, these are real people, so you can't legislate for that, but you may hope that they can find a way ahead that allows for it not to be a public issue all the time.
Right, we are now seeing pictures of King Charles III leaving his home, Clarence House, as he makes that very short journey around the corner to Westminster, to the Palace of Westminster, where, as we have said, he will be greeted by both MPs and peers. Greeted to cheers from the crowds who are waiting to see him there. Jonathan Dimbleby, this is the first stop on the King's tour. Why do you think it is so important to him that he is touring this country, the four nations of this country?
I think it's exceptionally important. There is no doubt that he cares strongly about all those nations, and he's visited them as Prince of Wales again and again and again. It's a reaffirmation of their separate identity within the United Kingdom. He, I'm sure, wants to make it absolutely clear, which symbolically these visits will do, that he is the King of Scotland as well as the King of the United Kingdom, that he is loyal to Northern Ireland while being at the same time immensely sensitive and sympathetic to the divisions that there are in Northern Ireland. And in Wales, where he became Prince of Wales and spent a lot of time and spends a lot of time still, it's a way of asserting we are in this together, however different we may be, and I am here for you, and I will be here for you, whatever happens in Scotland, whatever happens in Northern Ireland, whether there is in Northern Ireland a referendum, which conceivably, and some people think it will in due course, lead to the reunification of North and South, whether in Scotland there is a referendum which some think may be unstoppable in due course, which could lead to a separation there, that he is nonetheless there for Northern Ireland, he's there for Scotland as he is there for Wales. So these are important symbolic statements early in the reign, very early in the reign. Think of the strain on the man. He's going through personal grief, we've seen in his eyes and his voice, and yet we've been watching over these last days non-stop public duties. I mean, I just think, wow, what a guy.
The role of the monarch is intended to be one as a unifier, and this is a moment where all impulses are towards disintegration. So when you're talking about the different nations of the United Kingdom, it is potentially a disunited kingdom. He has actually really quite a tall order. I spoke to a lot of people in Scotland when I was working on the latest edition of my book, and there was this huge residual affection for his mother there, which was quite separate from politics. It was sort of, it was quite separate from any kind of nationalist movement. He does not have that same leeway, and so this is also the importance of this trip is entirely around building a new relationship and asserting his value within those countries.
I'm sure that's right, but we heard today, I mean, it's been repeated, I mean, the Scottish National Party said he will be King of Scotland whatever happens, so it's perfectly natural progress.
We have, of course, seen him stand in for his mother during the Queen's speech in May of this year with Camilla by his side, but this will be very different.
It is a very big moment. The first time that the King goes into Parliament as King to address Parliament.
Your Majesty, I welcome you and Her Majesty the Queen Consort to Parliament today on this solemn occasion. Her late Majesty, our treasured Queen, and your beloved and deeply missed mother came here to Westminster Hall many times to receive the congratulations of her loyal subjects in the two Houses of Parliament and to celebrate with them historic landmarks and her long life of dedicated public service. She was both a leader to and a servant of her people. Her humility and integrity commanded the respect and captured the imagination of peoples and nations across the globe. Her late Majesty's joyous, unstinting and reassuring presence across the years made it difficult to contemplate that her long and inspiring reign of deep and unparalleled devotion would ever end. We and the nation closed our eyes to this inevitability, but it has ended. Only a few months after we celebrated Her late Majesty's historic Platinum Jubilee. And as you said so movingly, Your Majesty, in your address to the nation, we all now feel a sense of loss beyond measure. Nevertheless, the qualities that Her late Majesty embodied with such constancy remain to inspire you, Your Majesty, your family, and all your subjects. We remember her commitment, her kindness, her humour, her courage, and her fortitude, as well as the deep faith which was the anchor in her life. Your Majesty, this is a historic space. Its walls built more than 900 years ago by William Rufus, and the magnificent hammer beam roof above us, commissioned 300 years later by Richard II. Since medieval times, much of our national story has taken place within these very walls, from civic gatherings to coronation banquets to the centuries during which this hall was at the heart of our legal system. But this ancient hall is a living space, and like our great nation, it continues to evolve. In 2012, Her late Majesty came to Westminster Hall to mark her Diamond Jubilee, and we saw the unveiling of the splendid memorial window, commissioned by both members of Parliament's Houses, which now graces the north wall of this historic space. And now, for 10 years, the light from that window has added beauty to the grey stones of this place, bathing them in colour and reminding hundreds, nay, thousands, millions of visitors to the Palace of Westminster of Her late Majesty's dedicated life of service. Like the light that shines through this memorial window, Her late Majesty's magnificent achievements will live on by permanently illuminating and enriching our lives and our national discourse. Your Majesty, even as we mourn the loss of our dear Queen, we and future generations will draw strength from her shining example. Your Majesty, on behalf of all the members of the House of Lords, I pledge my loyalty to you and wish you and Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, well in the life of service to which you have dedicated yourself. We are proud and indeed humbled to welcome you as our King, and we look forward to welcoming you on many more occasions to Parliament and to this hall in the years ahead. Finally, Your Majesty, the House has commissioned me to deliver the following humble address, which their lordships agreed on the 10th of September. I shall now read the address. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Lords spiritual and temporal in Parliament assembled, beg to leave to convey to Your Majesty the deep sympathy felt by this House in the grief Your Majesty has sustained by the death of our late beloved Queen, Your Majesty's mother of blessed and glorious memory. To extend to all the royal family the deep sympathy of this House in their grief, which is shared by all members. To assure Your Majesty that the example of selfless public service which our late Sovereign displayed over her reign of 70 years, her untiring endeavours for the welfare of her peoples, and her fortitude in adversity will ever be held in reverent, affectionate and grateful remembrance. And to express to Your Majesty our loyalty to Your Majesty's royal person and our firm conviction that under the blessing of divine providence, Your Majesty will, throughout your reign, further the happiness and protect the liberties of all your peoples in all your realms.
Your Majesty, let me repeat our welcome to you and to Her Majesty, the Queen Consorts. On this solemn occasion, members of both Houses of Parliament gather here to express our deep sympathy for the loss we have all sustained in the death of our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth. We have seen that this is a loss that is felt around the world. It is a loss to the United Kingdom, the overseas territories, the Crown dependencies, and many countries over which she reigned. It is a loss to the entire Commonwealth, which she did so much to nurture. It is a loss to all of us, but we know, most of all, it is a loss to you, Your Majesty, and to the royal family. Newspapers have been filled with photographs of Her late Majesty since the news broke. The most touching have been the glimpses into the family life which we usually kept sheltered from public view. Deep as our grief is, we know yours is deeper. We offer our heartfelt sympathy to you and all the royal family. We know that there is nothing we can say in the praise of our late Queen, your mother, that you will not already know. Over the past days, members of the House have spoken of their encounters with Queen Elizabeth. They have spoken of her sense of duty, her wisdom, her kindness, her humour, how she touched the lives of hundreds of thousands of their constituents in her visits to every part of this country. Their words have been heartfelt. She sat in this historic hall, as you sit now, on many occasions. Some of those occasions were to celebrate milestones in her own reign. The addresses to celebrate her silver, golden, and diamond jubilees shared a common thread, that our constitutional monarchy is a symbol of stability in an ever-changing world. As Speaker Boothroyd said, Queen Elizabeth's wisdom and grace demonstrated for all to see the value of a constitutional monarchy in securing the liberties of our citizens and the fundamental unity of this kingdom and the Commonwealth. On other occasions, our late Queen was here to mark the historic moments, such as the 50th anniversary of the Second World War, a war in which she herself served in the armed forces. And in 1988, we celebrated the 300th anniversary of the revolutions of 1688 to 1689. It is perhaps very British to celebrate revolutions by presenting an address to Her Majesty. But those revolutions led to our constitutional freedoms, set out the foundation for a stable monarchy which protects liberty. In your first address to the nation, you recognised your life would change as a result of the new responsibilities. You pledge yourself to uphold constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. These are weighty responsibilities, as the early Queen Elizabeth said in her final speech to parliamentarians. To be a king and wear a crown is a thing more glorious to them that see it than it is pleasant that them that bear it. We know you hold the greatest respect, the precious traditions, the freedoms and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary governance. We know that you will bear those responsibilities which fall to you with the fortitude, dignity demonstrated by Her late Majesty. When the House met at the Accession Council, my first symbolic act was to make the oath to be faithful and bear true allegiance to Your Majesty, King Charles. And so it is my duty to present our humble address to you, our new King, to express both our sorrow and loss of our Sovereign Lady and our confidence in the future in your reign. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's dutiful, loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, express deep sympathy, felt by this House for the great sorrow which Your Majesty has sustained by the death of the late Queen, Your Majesty's mother. Extended to all the royal family the deep sympathy of this House in their grief, which is shared by all its members. Assure Your Majesty that Her late Majesty's unstinting dedication over a reign of over 70 years to the service of our great country and its people, and to the service of the countries and the peoples of the rest of the wider Commonwealth, which will always be held affectionate and grateful remembrance. And to express to Your Majesty our loyalty to you and our conviction that you will strive to uphold the liberties and to promote the happiness of the people in all your realms, now and in years to come.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, I am deeply grateful for the addresses of condolence by the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which so touchingly encompass what our late sovereign, my beloved mother, the Queen, meant to us all. As Shakespeare says of the earlier Queen Elizabeth, she was a pattern to all princes living. As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us and which reminds us of the vital parliamentary traditions to which members of both houses dedicate yourselves with such personal commitment for the betterment of us all. Parliament is the living and breathing instrument of our democracy. That your traditions are ancient, we see in the construction of this great hall, and the reminders of medieval predecessors of the office to which I have been called, and the tangible connections to my darling late mother we see all around us, from the fountain in New Palace Yard, which commemorates the late Queen's Silver Jubilee, to the sundial in Old Palace Yard for the Golden Jubilee, the magnificent stained glass window before me for the Diamond Jubilee, and so poignantly and yet to be formally unveiled, your most generous gift to Her late Majesty to mark the unprecedented Platinum Jubilee, which we celebrated only 3 months ago, with such joyful hearts. The great bell of Big Ben, one of the most powerful symbols of our nation throughout the world, and housed within the Elizabeth Tower, also named for my mother's Diamond Jubilee, will mark the passage of the late Queen's progress from Buckingham Palace to this Parliament on Wednesday. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, we gather today in remembrance of the remarkable span of the Queen's dedicated service to her nations and peoples. While very young, Her late Majesty pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. This vow she kept with unsurpassed devotion. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
King's bodyguard. King's bodyguard. Shut up!
The new king, King Charles III, receiving that rendition of the national anthem, looking visibly moved by what he heard.
He was particularly moved, wasn't he, by the words of Sir Lindsay Hoyle. You saw his face as Lindsay Hoyle, on behalf of the members of the House of Commons, expressed his own sorrow at the suffering that the family is enduring at the moment. And this ceremony is really remarkable, unwitnessed by most of us ever before. And it is quite formal, it is quite symbolic, totally symbolic, and yet very real, as he pledged his duty, echoed his mother's vow, which she said that she was resolved faithfully to, he said, I am resolved faithfully to follow in my mother's footsteps, the example that she set. And you look at this formal ceremony and you compare it with dictatorships, with other regimes which come brutally to power in one form or another, and the stability that this offers, whatever the evolving politics, whatever the ferocity of debate in the House of Commons, whatever the divisions in the country, provide, I think, what many people very, very much want. They're saying farewell now to saying goodbye to Lindsay Hoyle there on the left, the Queen Consort. And he now goes off virtually straight away, to Scotland for a very similar ceremony before he follows in Scotland the coffin into St Giles Cathedral.
Catherine, I think watching that with you, there was a real sense of emptiness in the ancient Westminster Hall when he was listening to those tributes paid by both the Commons and Lords leaders about his late mother, knowing for all of us that she will not return there in life, this monarch who has reigned for 7 decades, who has taken part in so many parliamentary events. The next time she does return to that hall will be in her coffin for the nation to have a focal point for its mourning for a period of days.
And that was brought home by Lindsay Hoyle's repetition of all the different monuments and tributes there have been for the different jubilees. That longevity that allowed us to believe that she was immortal, which everybody is now grappling with in one way or another. But there was an interesting difference there as well, because you saw the King interacting with members of the audience there. Unlike his mother, he knows so many members of Parliament, he knows so many ministers, he has been interacting with them for years in many different ways. And so although this was a restating of his intention to reign as his mother has done, it also in some way showcased the way that will be different, because he has a very different and very active relationship with many of those people.
I think it's a truly important point. It's easy to forget that while the Queen had huge experience there, they leave. He has had huge experience as well.
The new king departing the Palace of Westminster to cheers from the waiting crowd there. Our political editor was also watching the events as they have taken place this morning. Robert, what did you make of what we've just seen, just to underline the point there made by Jonathan that this is the first time we are being allowed to see what happens when the new monarch goes into the Houses of Parliament for the first time as monarch?
Yeah, moving and powerful, and actually in one important sense, actually unique in British history, in 1952, when Queen Elizabeth took the throne, those humble addresses that we heard read out by the Speaker of the House of Commons and the Speaker of the House of Lords, they were actually delivered to Buckingham Palace by officers of Parliament. This is the first time, in fact, that the monarch has come to Westminster Hall to receive those humble addresses. The most important element of all of this, of course, was quite apart from those sincere expressions of condolence made by Lords and MPs through their speakers, was the way that we heard King Charles say, as we all know, that the Queen dutifully upheld a responsibility to underpin our constitution, underpin parliamentary democracy, and he vowed in front of 900 lords and MPs to do the same. On a sort of personal note, I found it all very moving. My late father was in the House of Lords for 30 years. It was a great honour of his life to serve in the House of Lords. He had no doubt about the importance of the way we do government in this country, and it was stirring to see King Charles pledge to uphold the way that we do democracy for the reason, actually, that Jonathan Dimbleby just said, which is here we've got crowds on the street ushering in a new phase of government, whereas in many countries of the world, you cannot take democracy for granted, and you cannot be confident that on these sorts of occasions we're not going to see tyrants and dictators taking over. So an important moment for British democracy.
Robert, thank you. We have seen, haven't we, Catherine, throughout the last few days since the news was announced of the Queen's death, that when we have seen the new King, he has had Queen Consort Camilla beside him. She is already becoming, as the Duke of Edinburgh was to the Queen, his constant as well as his consort.
She has also performed that role in his personal and working life for a long time now. She does look very comfortable in it. It's because the Queen settled the question of her title before this accession, that removed really the last controversial aspect to what she would be, what role she would perform. I know her actually really quite well, and it's interesting for me seeing her in these ceremonial roles because she's doing it very well. She's doing the thing of looking impassive in a way that she has to do. But this is a woman who has used her own unexpected platform as his wife for very interesting purposes, including dealing with some really quite gritty issues around women, around, for example, violence against women. And she too, we shouldn't forget that she too is having now to shift into a different phase. You know, one hopes that she would continue her patronage and support for those issues, but she'll have to do it in a different way. But you also saw there were some wonderfully human reactions during that speech from both of them. There was the moment where he laughed at Lindsay Hoyle, made a very wonderful joke about it being very British to talk about revolutions to the monarch in that setting.
A glimmer of light in what is very much a solemn day, I think.
But she also, at the point where he talked about the weight of the crown, she reacted because she knows so well what her husband, don't forget, this is a couple, a very loving couple, and she knows what he's going through. And so you saw her visibly react to that point. And she has been an extraordinary support to Charles, and she will continue to be so.
The depth of love that they have for one another cannot be exaggerated. They support each other. She supports him even when he's away. She is always, as it were, there. And she's fantastically down to earth. She, like him, is very, very warm. She is very well anchored. And I think that together they have the qualities that are required to take the monarchy, the institution forward within the framework which we've just been observing in a way that will meet the aspirations and needs of the public. We've seen how he has been extraordinarily warmly received when he returned to Parliament, to Westminster, to Buckingham Palace for the first time. His speech, the warmth of reception in the press, which is quite important in these matters because they can create mood very quickly, regardless of what the majority may think. And I suspect that there must be a measure of deep satisfaction around the household that the real qualities of the new king have been seen and that they have been endorsed so widely, because that, and I can think of nothing that would have made the late Queen happier than to know that it was like this.
And I guess a sense of relief as well as satisfaction, and also this the imagery that we're seeing, that we are seeing them very much as a couple, even though this is the King's tour, and the British public getting used to the fact that they are effectively a twin pack.
Yep. He refers to the whole time as my darling wife, doesn't he, as well as the Queen Consort, and she will be with him, I'm sure, a great deal, great strength. As Catherine was saying, she's also got a great independence of activity, which is fantastic because it isn't self-serving in any way. You never think she is trying to steal any limelight from him. They are a genuine partnership, and she knows, of course, that hers is, in formal terms, as Queen Consort, the subsidiary role, but there's no sense of any who am I or who is she. We get her. I think we get her very easily.
I think they actually, the way she walked there, I mean, I may be reading too much into this, but she was only very slightly behind him. You know, that there is, of course, this convention that the consort trails behind the sovereign, and they looked like a partnership. They did not look like a subservient wife there, and you know, knowing everything I know about her dedication to feminism, she would not have wanted to do that.
The optics all important there. We're just watching pictures now as the King and Queen Consort that we've just been discussing are on the move away from Westminster. They are now making their way on their long journey, obviously not doing that by car, but this part of the journey by car to Scotland as the next stop on the King's tour. They are heading, as we've spoken earlier in the programme, to Edinburgh, where the King will be reunited with his siblings and eventually where he will follow his late mother's coffin into that service at St Giles Cathedral. Our correspondent Neil Connery is in the city of Edinburgh for us this morning. Neil, can you take us through exactly what we are expecting to happen later there today?
Well, as you say, the eyes of the world in the coming hours will be focused on Edinburgh. As we know, the Queen's coffin has been lying in rest overnight in the throne room of the Palace of Holyrood House behind me. Later on this afternoon there will be a ceremonial procession from the palace up to St Giles Cathedral. Of course, that will only begin once King Charles III and the Queen Consort have arrived here in Edinburgh, joining other members of the royal family. That procession will head up, as I say, to St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk, the parish church, if you like, of the old town of Edinburgh, for a service of prayer and reflection. Now, after that service, members of the public will be able to file past the coffin as the Queen lies in rest inside the cathedral for a period of around 24 hours before the Queen's coffin is then taken to Edinburgh Airport and flown back by the Royal Air Force to RAF Northolt in London.
Neil Connery, thank you very much. Just returning back to the events that we've seen this morning in London, where the King, as monarch, went to Parliament for the first time in his reign since the passing of his mother on Thursday. Tributes today from both the Lords and from the Commons. The Lords leader, Jonathan, paying tribute, talking of the Queen's commitment, her kindness, her courage and her fortitude. King Charles saying he wants to follow in her selfless duty. He has got an incredibly hard example of duty to follow, hasn't he?
It is an enormous challenge, and he would be the first, when he said it, to accept that that is the case. However, I have known the King for now over 30 years, quite well. And I venture to say that the qualities that the Speaker of the Lords identified in the Queen are embedded in him as well, and that he will do exactly what he says in that vow to follow in her footsteps for as long as he is given on this earth. And we are witnessing, we are all part of a great history. It will soon, inevitably over the days, become our past history, but it is also our future. And it's the future of this state, this nation which is very uncertain. We don't know where it goes. The one constancy is that down there, those vehicles that are moving, taking him to Northolt, contain an individual who will do everything in his power and his very, very considerable ability, with his huge knowledge of the world and of this country, his passionate commitment to the deprived, his great commitment to the huge international problems that we face, which will be presented in different ways, what will be embedded in him in a way that I think will allow him, formally and informally, to earn the respect and indeed the love of a great many people.
Catherine, that sense of those qualities, we know the Prince as Prince. Do you think the British public is getting to see, is believing in those qualities like his mother as King?
I do, and I agree with what Jonathan said. I would add something though. I think there is absolutely no doubt that King Charles will emulate his mother to the best of his ability. Any risks to his reign, to the monarchy, will come not from what he does now, but from the past or externally. Because he had such a very long apprenticeship as heir to the throne, and he was very activist in ways, in fact, that he talked to Jonathan about in Jonathan's very famous biography, and then talked to me about. There are aspects to what he did then that could yet be controversial. He will not court controversy now, and what you are seeing is him modelling his version of kingship, which does look on the surface remarkably like his mother's own version of being a sovereign.
It will be a hard moment, though, on a human level for him to go to Edinburgh and to see his mother's coffin and to follow it into that service.
We saw the expression on his face when his sorrow was identified by the Speaker.
Yes.
And he will walk behind that coffin. It will be hugely demanding. It's quite a long walk, and he will go behind that coffin to St Giles Cathedral thinking, that is the coffin bearing my mother. He will also think, I am the king of a large realm, and I have duties in front of me to honour, and I will do that. And he will grit his teeth, and he will do it, and his family will be there in support. And it will be another stage in this extraordinary pageant which we're following with such intensity.
Jonathan, thank you very much as ever. Catherine, also thank you so much for joining me this morning. That is where we will leave you for now, following that ceremony at Westminster Hall this morning. The King and Queen Consort are now, as we've been saying, making their way back to Scotland and will arrive in Edinburgh later today, this afternoon, to be reunited with his siblings, and for the first time since their mother's death. They will then together walk behind her coffin as it makes its way along the famous Royal Mile to St Giles's Cathedral. We will have full coverage on ITV of all the events here from 1 o'clock. But for now, from all of us on this historic morning in Westminster, goodbye.